We have too many things going on in the news right now, but the main thing that's going on is Trump is breaking with his base in reference to Israel and Iran. Trump ran and promised to be the constant candidate of peace who would start new wars, whose strength would allow him to resolve diplomatic issues that have plagued the world for decades. He'll just solve them like that because he's so strong and he's so smart and he's so this and he's so that. And he'll take the fight to the deep state and stop the deep state from capitalizing on the wars of the American people. And you know what actually ended up happening? None of that. None of that happened. Okay, because anybody with an IQ over 80 would have been able to have predicted the fact that this dude was a blowhard who actually made more enemies than friends. And so as a result, the Ukraine war didn't end on day 1. It didn't end on day 30. It didn't end on day 60. It didn't end on day 90. And I'm pretty sure it hasn't ended at day 120, which should be approximately where we're at right now. When it comes to the conditions in the Middle East and North Africa, they're as volatile as they've ever been. When it comes to the Israel-Gaza conflict, it's still ongoing, and there's still hundreds of thousands of people in a precarious position that might result in their deaths. So no, Trump is not some 5D chess master negotiator. We've known this for a decade, and yet somehow the Trump base is still coping, believing that somehow he's going to pull out a 5D chess maneuver that's going to resolve everything. Dave Smith, a libertarian who hates the military-industrial complex, who hates interventionism, somehow deluded himself in the previous election cycle into believing that Donald Trump was going to be the pro-peace candidate over the military establishment. Let me go ahead and tell you that the quote-unquote military-industrial complex establishment would be more tepid in reference to Iran and Israel than Donald Trump is being, where he's effectively supporting everything that Israel does and is also just randomly tweeting out, evacuate Tehran. What an insane time to be alive. I can't believe we have this buffoon in the White House, but it is what it is. So we're going to watch a libertarian along with some anti-war contrarian, I don't even know how to describe Sagar and Jetty. He's like contrarian right wing and crystal ball contrarian left wing. We're going to watch them do a drum circle about how they're disavowing Trump and his military interventionism, which should be pretty funny. Let me bring these characters on screen and you can watch me take psychic damage for your enjoyment. Let's go.
Friend of the show, Dave Smith. We're going to be talking about the fallout here from the U.S. Involvement in the war between Israel and Iran. But most importantly, we want to get to the actual goal here of the Israeli military campaign. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu really giving the game away yesterday in an interview with Fox News, where he calls for regime change with Iran. Let's take a listen.
So is regime change part of the effort here?
Could certainly be the result, because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. It's plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people would throw these theological thugs out. I mean, they murder them. They oppress them for 46 years. They've yearned for freedom. I mean, they shoot women because their hair is uncovered. They shoot students. They just suck the oxygen from this brave and gifted people, the Iranian people.
I want to talk about the nuclear threat, and I want to talk about President Trump. You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with him in a way that is weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars. He took up this fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He said, made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich. He's been very forceful. So for them, he's enemy number one.
Yeah.
Look, they also tried to kill me, but I'm his junior partner.
When did
they understand that President Trump is a great threat to Iran's plans to weaponize nuclear weapons and use them.
When did you tell President Trump you were going to launch these strikes?
Look, I've been in constant contact with President Trump. We've known each other for many years. And obviously, we informed our American friends and President Trump, our great friend, ahead of time. No, we did. He knew about it, of course.
I mean,
so what's interesting about this is I feel like Israel is doing some rhetorical sleight of hand in order to make it obvious that the United States is going to back them. And just to outline this for the chat, I of course believe that republicanism, mixed economy capitalism, representative democracy, all that kind of stuff, all of these are universal human goods. And I do wish that the Iranian regime had that. But as a war on terror veteran, I can tell you that when people don't want what you're trying to give them, they end up just kind of waiting for you to leave. And that's actually what happened in the Iraq war. Was we wanted to give them secular, liberal democracy, and the Iraqis just didn't want it. They wanted us gone so they could do their own thing, so they could have their civil war, they could figure out who was going to be in charge, and then they could, create their own destiny going forward. They weren't interested in what we had to offer them. So now, after the Iraq war, after the civil war, after everything, they kind of have this like hybrid of Iraqi corruption, democratic processes that might be able to counter it a little bit, Iranian influence, and then the weakness of the current central government that lost half of the country to ISIS and then had to claw its way back with Iran's help in order to reclaim those territories. So I have no idea what the future of Iraq is, but I don't want to do the same thing in Iran. I don't want to walk in and have half a dozen, ethno-religious petty differences result in us taking out an autocratic regime, and then those people go to war and then they slaughter each other. I'm not really interested in causing Iraq 2.0. So I think most of the American people kind of side with me, at least in that regard. So putting that aside, if there's going to be regime change has to come from the people. They have to be interested in overthrowing the Ayatollahs. I'm not interested in doing that for them. I'm not interested in American military boots being on the ground for that purpose. So then it comes to the next question. Well, should or could Iran have a nuclear device? And if they have a nuclear device, they've talked shit about the United States, probably because they want to prevent regime change. They've talked shit about Israel because Israel, they've talked about wiping off the face of the map. At least they did in the previous, the Ahmadinejad, regime, talked about how bad Israel was and how bad they wanted to take them out. So is them having a bomb tolerable? And I truly don't know because I haven't done enough research in order to see how psychotic the current regime is. So Benjamin Netanyahu says that they're psychotic. They'll rain devastation down on the planet. They'll become a hermit kingdom that is a power broker in the Middle East and North Africa for generations to come. And so therefore, that's not a position that he's willing to tolerate. However, I don't even think Israelis are ready for the kind of war that he's also suggesting. So I'm actually a little bit leaving it up in the air as to what I decide, and I'm still consuming information in order to figure out what I believe about geopolitical crap right now. So let's see. Now, needs to be remarked, Trump is betraying his principles by acting like a hawk in certain regards. But let's check in the chat real quick because I missed you guys. It's been like a whole 12 hours. AF says, good day, chat. Hi, AF. Good to see you, brother. Then Sapien says, Netanyahu doing it all for the Iranian people. Yeah, isn't that sweet of him? Isn't it sweet of Benjamin Netanyahu to care about the civil rights of the Iranian people with no other motivation, by the way? No other motivation. He's doing it out of the pureness of his heart. John says, F, this prime minister is a weasel. Well, it seems like you guys aren't falling for the stump speech. Maybe I'm too naive. Conservative liberalism says, I'm Trump's junior partner. Say what you want about Bibi. He knows his audience. Yeah. He keeps being like, we're best friends. We talk all the time. We love each other. He's such a strong guy. I've seen him bench press a cow. Israel ain't putting boots on the ground. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Plague Doctor says, but Connor, don't you know that Iraq has nukes? We have to stop the spread of communism. They hit the Twin Towers, man. Unironically, that's me, though. Christian Blair says, outside of their land and U.S. troops should be a cluster F giving the terrain of Iran. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like, not only are you talking about like mountains and steppe, you're also talking about highly urbanized areas in mountainous steppe. So you're taking like the worst parts of Iraq and you're combining it with the worst parts of Afghanistan. It's actually horrible, like a horrible game plan. I don't think we should have any kind of on the ground military intervention whatsoever. Christian Lair says, outside of their land and U.S. troops would be a cluster F. Oh, yeah, sorry, that's one I just read. Melody says, I'm cool as long as we don't do boots on the ground. Rather us provide / sell everything to Israel and they do it. Yeah, kind of. But then at the same time, does that mean that if they don't have the full technological capacity that we do with like stealth bombers and bunker busters, does Iran just build all this stuff underground and then they get the bomb and then eventually we see mushroom clouds over Tel Aviv and we just kind of have to live with that? I don't know, man. I don't know. Anyways, let's watch.
There were reports that President Trump kind of helped you achieve your strategic surprise by publicly urging you not to attack when he already knew you had decided to do it. So you were closely coordinating with the U.S. throughout this process.
Look, we're fully coordinated, but understand that America, under President Trump, will make the decisions that are best for America. And that's the way it is. He understands that I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, must make the decisions that are important for the survival of my country, and he will do what is best for America.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Israel doesn't always ask for our permission. Sometimes they ask for our forgiveness, where they just say, hey, this is what we're doing, and you're going to have to deal with the fallout. So Israel is not a pure puppet of the American imperial machine, and neither is the United States a puppet of Israel in a pure sense. They're friends or allies who operate with similar goals, and those goals have overlap, so they work together, but they're not always going to agree, especially on kinetic operations. They're not always going to agree on kinetic operations. Bud123 says, how do we know that Iran would use it? We don't. We don't, Bud123. That's part of the problem. We don't know that they would use it. So you just kind of have to, let's presume they get the bomb, and they go on to their national state news and they say, if Israel keeps doing what it's doing, we're going to nuke Tel Aviv. Then you just have to go, well, I hope they don't nuke Tel Aviv. And then that's just the world that you live in now. And Saudi Arabia likewise said that if Iran gets the bomb, they're getting the bomb as well. And so as a result, you have a three-way nuclear detente in the Middle East and North Africa with, religions that believe in an apocalypse. So you just might get a crazy leader who wants to usher in the apocalypse. Shadow 2 Bravo says, and this is important. Good morning, Connor. I announced my campaign for the Idaho State House next month. Local elections need to be bigger focus for Republicans. Well, brother, if you keep me posted on that, then I'll shout you out whenever. Dank Brandon says he did see him bench press a cow, but it was actually just a cheeseburger. And after BB puked in the bathroom, rude and mean. Melody says, we go in, baby. I hope not. Randy Chang says, we don't know Putin would use it, or North Korea. We don't need more nuclear powers generally. Agreed. So, but then this is the question. What forces are you willing to commit to attack a foreign nation in order to prevent their capacity for developing a nuclear bomb? Apparently, bear in mind, I'm quoting other people, you only need 5% enriched uranium in order to burn that in a nuclear reactor. And there are IAEA reports showing that there's the residue of 60% enriched uranium, which would only be necessary if they were engaging in an active nuclear weapons program. Christian Lair says, again, this is all Trump's fault anyways, given he pulled the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Well, he also withdrew from the Iran deal, right? So he withdrew from the Iran deal without a better plan. So what did Iran do for the past decade while he's been fighting for power and been distracted? Iran's been developing a quote-unquote space program in order to develop ballistic missiles, and they've also been enriching uranium. So, whatever says Europe doesn't need more migrant waves from wars, I mean, agreed there as well. So, yeah, I don't think anybody is really interested in regime change. Not at this point. I think we all have fatigue.
That is a relationship of mutual respect and mutual confidence.
I mean, there's so much going on there, Dave. There is regime change. There is the flattery and the lies potentially about this some so-called Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. And then finally there is the, really buttering it up, but calling Trump to join him in this war on regime change. Just broadly, we want to give you the floor, both to react to that and to the entire situation here.
Yeah, well, it's just you're allowed to throw as many lies at the wall as you want to when you're selling a war. So there's a lot there to kind of unpack. Number one, I would just say, first off, the accusation that Iran was trying to assassinate Donald Trump just doesn't meet the most basic of smell tests. I mean, so you're telling me that the Iranian regime essentially declared war on the United States of America already, tried to murder the sitting president, and yet his response was to try to negotiate with them for a couple months until finally we had Israel attack them. Does that make sense to anybody?
It makes sense to me. This is my presumption, Dave Smith. God, I hate Dave Smith. No offense. Like, I'm sure he's a great guy to get a beer with, but holy shit. Iran plan to assassinate Trump. Let's just see if there's anything that we can find here. Iran ordered an operative to assassinate Trump before the blah, blah, blah. So let's go ahead and read this. This is from November 8th, 2024. Iran ordered an operative to assassinate Trump before the election, federal prosecutors say. The alleged would-be assassin is believed to be in Iran and remains at large, prosecutors said. The Iranian government ordered an operative to assassinate Donald Trump before the 2024 election. Manhattan federal prosecutors said Friday, the latest in a string of assassination plots directed at the former and future president. Prosecutors charge Fareed Shakeri with murder for hire and providing material support to a foreign terrorist organization. He is believed to be in Iran and remains at large, prosecutors said. In addition to the plot to kill Trump, Shakeri and two other men, Carlisle Rivera and Jonathan Lodholt, were charged with separate attempted murder for hire schemes targeting a U.S. citizen of Iranian origin who is publicly opposed to the Iranian government. According to a criminal complaint unsealed in Manhattan federal court, Shakeri said during an FBI interview that in September he was directed by the IRGC of Iran to surveil and kill Trump, whom the charging papers identify as victim 4. When Shakeri told an IRGC official that doing so would prove expensive, the official responded with money's not an issue, which Shakeri understood to mean the IRGC previously had spent a significant sum of money on efforts to murder victim 4 and was willing to continue spending a lot of money in its attempt to procure victim 4's assassination. 1 month later, on October 7th, according to the prosecutors, the IRGC ordered Shakeri to put forward a plan to assassinate Trump within 1 week, and if that proved impossible, to pause the plan until after Election Day because the IRGC assumed Trump would lose, making him easier to kill. According to the complaint, Shakeri claimed in the FBI interview that he didn't intend to propose a plan to murder Trump within the time frame dictated by the IRGC official. Okay. So what's the problem here? So members of the, Trump says he's the muscular threat to Iran. He just talks and everybody bends the knee. He's a threat to the outside world because everybody respects him so much. Entire nations get weak at the knees when he says something publicly. So why wouldn't Iran want a more sober dealer with the Iranian officials, like the Democratic Party, like Kamala Harris, like President Obama? Because let's face it, Kamala Harris would follow in Obama's footsteps. Why wouldn't they prefer Kamala to Obama? And why wouldn't they hate Trump for backing Israel super hard? That actually seems fairly logical to me. So, and I think when you're president of the United States, you just kind of presume that everybody's going to try to kill you. I thought that was just a presumption. So, Christian Valeris clarifies that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is actually the Iran deal. So that makes sense. Kingslayer Damocles says the Iran deal was just a way for Obama to give Iran $6 billion and give them the ability to make nukes. The Iran deal was toothless. Well, far be it for me to relitigate the Iran deal a decade later. Rainbow Wright says, hey, Connor, glad I could catch a stream even for just a bit. Found your channel about a week ago and enjoy your perspective. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Rainbow Wright. Appreciate you, brother. Or sister. But didn't they send an assassin? Well, apparently there's this guy who said the IRGC was willing to pay him in order to take him out during the election. Shadow 2 Bravo, it makes perfect sense if you're not a libertarian. Okay, good. Just double checking. I wanted to be sober. Rainbow Wright says, don't forget to like the stream, everyone. He's not wrong. That's an excellent point.
He tried to murder Donald Trump and then he entered negotiations with that. Come on, this is too ridiculous. And you could go back. The thing about Saddam Hussein that a lot of people kind of forget in history is that it is true that at one point Saddam Hussein did have what you could call weapons of mass destruction. He used chemical weapons in his 1980 through 1986 war with Iran and was supported by the United States of America while he did it. He then got rid of those weapons programs. And the neocons and Benjamin Netanyahu himself. You can read in his writing in the 90s when he was telling us that Iran was a few years away from a nuclear weapon all the way back then. But he was also saying that they wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein for other reasons, for their clean break strategy. You can read about this in the Project for a New American Century, in the Clean Break memo written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser. They talked about this over and over and over again. And then after 9/11, they said the issue here is weapons of mass destruction. But that was, they always wanted the regime change. And so it's the same thing again. The goal here has been regime change in Iran. He's been open about this. He even admitted it a little bit there. But let's just take them, look, let's just really assess the situation where we are right now. Let's take them by their own logic. If, as all the hawks are bragging right now, or saying that essentially Israel was already at war with Iran because Iran attacked first on October 7th. Their proxies attacked. And what does that mean? You know, it's like when they say Iran is the #1 sponsor of terror. Do they ever have to back that up with data? Do they ever, like, have you ever heard one?
I feel like half of the questions that Dave Smith asks are researchable. And then I'm trying to think of this way in not a stupid way. I almost have to presume that Dave Smith either he's an idiot or he's presuming his audience is an idiot. I don't know what to make of this, because effectively he's saying our governments are hostile to governments that are hostile to us, and that's a conspiracy. And it's like, no. If they're telling you, like this is just geopolitics, man. Like, power abhors a vacuum. Who controls petroleum is important. Who controls the Red Sea is important. And so the United States and Israel saying like, hey, here's our geopolitical posture. Here are the people that we want to work with. Here are the people that we don't want to work with. That's not a conspiracy. That's just politics. I don't understand this like appeal to conspiracism if they're making public statements about their desires. And then hold on, he just said something where he's like, isn't it weird that what was the most recent isn't it weird that I want to sorry, listen to this again.
Israel was already at war with Iran because Iran attacked first on October 7th. Their proxies attacked. And what does that mean? You know, it's like when they say Iran is the #1 sponsor of terror. Do they ever have to back that up with data?
So let's go ahead and back this up with data. You know, he's saying that Iran is quote unquote a state sponsor of terror and one of the biggest backers of terrorism in the region. What does Iran give Hezbollah? Hezbollah-Iran relations. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a key patron of the Lebanese Shia Islamist militia and political party Hezbollah. Iran's support, including financial aid, deployment of Revolutionary Guards, and training, has played an important role in Hezbollah's formation and development. Hezbollah has functioned as an Iran's proxy since its inception and is considered to be part of the axis of resistance. I'll open that tab. Hezbollah itself, founded in 1982, originated as an Iranian-backed Shiite militia group in Lebanon. All right, so, sorry, let's read this last one. Hezbollah has received substantial financial support from Iran, estimated to range from $700 million to $1 billion annually. Additionally, Iran provides weapons, training, and other forms of assistance to Hezbollah. Okay, so, I mean, that seems like a substantive support for Hezbollah. And then Islamic Jihad is like a subgroup of Hezbollah, I guess, that they do for optical reasons. So we know that they support two organizations that have engaged in terrorist attacks. Okay. The Axis of Resistance is an informal coalition of Iranian-supported militant and political organizations across the Middle East formed by Iran. It unites actors committed to countering the influence of the United States and Israel in the region. It most notably includes Hezbollah, Islamic Resistance in Iraq, the Popular Mobilization for I'm pronouncing things like Aiden Ross today. The Popular Mobilization Forces and the Yemeni Houthis. The Houthis, who are also currently engaged in terrorism. It sometimes includes Hamas and a variety of other Palestinian militant groups. Okay, so Dave Smith, you could have Googled this. What's the Iranian Hamas relations. Iranian support for Hamas. Since the 1990s, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been sponsoring Hamas with military aid and training and financial aid. Iran has remained, I don't know if I pronounce it right. Is it Iran or is it Iran? I don't know. Has remained a key patron of Hamas, providing them with funds, weapons, and training. According to the 2020 U.S. Department of State report, Iran provides about $100 million annually to Palestinian militant groups, including Hamas. As of 2023, according to an Israeli security source, Iran has significantly increased its funding for Hamas to $350 million a year. Like, you can counter this information if you want and say that they've received no dollars. I would like to see your source. I mean, obviously, I have the State Department in Israel, and you can call them biased sources. That's fine. But, I mean, here's a photo. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in 2012 just chilling. And then this is Hamas founder Ahmed Yassin meeting with Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei in Tehran in 1998. So, brother, it seems like the information is available that Iran supports Hamas and Hezbollah and supports militant groups in Syria and in Iraq. It seems like that's just like openly available information. So why are you pretending that this is something that's like even controversial? What is going on, big bro? What's going on, Dave Smith? Why do you not have Google? Are you in a rural area of Montana with poor cell phone reception and no internet? What's going on? What's going on, big bro? Thung Dark says, I've never heard a realistic critique of the Iran deal that wasn't an attack on Obama. I don't know how any economic benefit to Iran being contingent on our inspection on their stuff is toothless. I'm not going to litigate it because here's the line of argumentation is that any civilian nuclear program can be further enriched into weapons grade uranium. That's the argument. That's the danger, is that any civilian nuclear program can easily be converted into weapons grade uranium. And then with inspectors, because this is what happened in Iraq during the 1990s, with inspectors, the Iranian regime can agree to a treaty that says that inspectors have the right to go anywhere within the country, but they can put in caveats like they need an escort, and they can also just prohibit inspections. And so if they create a mountain complex because they're in the steppes, they're in the mountains, that's part of the fear, is that they're going to be hard to hit with bunker busters. They can just deny access to inspectors whenever they feel like militarizing the stockpile. And so effectively, you're giving somebody like a blunt piece of steel that they can sharpen at any moment with which to stab you. And they're constantly talking about how bad they want to stab you. You know what I'm saying? Like I get it. Ultimately, you should probably just give him the piece of steel, let him sharpen it, and then you should shoot him while he's trying to stab you. That would make more sense. But we're also talking about betting billions of people's lives on the result of this moral quandary. So, excusame. I drank all of my tea without spilling it. Fantastic. Shadow 2 Bravo says, funding Hezbollah, Hamas, and other groups in Syria seems like a fact that Iran is funding terrorist orgs. Yeah. Who knew? Who knew that you could Google these things and find them out in about 30 seconds? Not Dave Smith, apparently. He forgot Google exists. Christian Blair says, AIPAC can bitch and moan all they want and didn't stop Obama admin in Iran from following the plan. Their major issue is that the plan didn't prevent proxies from getting funds, which had nothing to do with the plan. Gotcha. Fung Dark says, you actually don't need any enrichment to run certain reactor types of which Iran was planning to build, so they never needed any enrichment for that reactor, which is why they're probably using a civilian nuclear program as a pretext with which to get maximally close to a bomb as possible. Yeah. They give them training and Russian weapons. Hezbollah is more like a cartel. Yep. Press the like button, folks. Possum Nation brings up an excellent point. Rainbow Wright says, doesn't Iran have a whole wing of the military dedicated to training, arming, and funding terrorist organizations? I mean, apparently it's the IRGC, so. Sorry. Welcome to the 60 people, who are hanging out with us. Conservative liberalism says, we fed Osama bin Laden to the fish, and some people insist we spell his name with a U. Let's just accept that languages aren't compatible. True. Dude Mansu says, counter to pronounce Iran. Seriously, my boss is Iranian. Oh, okay. Iran. Okay, I'll try. I'll probably forget that. My apologies. Conservative liberalism says you can't just make a third way to pronounce that country. This is madness. Iran was supporting Muqtada al-Sadr in Sadr City, Iraq. Yep. They were shipping in EFPs by the tens of thousands. Yup. In order to kill coalition forces, 100%. That was one of the funniest tweets that I saw. There's this guy. I don't even know if it's Shadow 2 Bravo. It could be somebody, it could be his alt. I have no idea. But there's this guy with Greek letters in his name. He's a special forces guy. He's either in Montana or Idaho, and we're just friends on Twitter. And we disagree on politics a healthy chunk, but there's some overlap. He's kind of like a libertarian, giga-libertarian, isolationist dude who thought all the words were a lie. And he tweeted out, it's like, on one hand, I hate interventionist war. On the other hand, I saw what EFPs did in person, so fuck Iran. So that was an interesting perspective. Christian Blair says, yes, there was never any disagreement that Iran was been the largest funder of state sponsor of terrorism. Yeah, apparently. I'm like going blind as I get older. R. Hickernell says, really seems like Trump ripping up that Iran nuclear deal with no plan was a bad idea. Seems like he did it because Obama did it and he's petty. Are you wrong? And then Harmonic says, have you ever been to Koran? No, I've been to Iraq though. All right.
Data? Do they ever have you ever heard one war hawk who makes the claim that Iran is the #1 sponsor of terror ever show you, look, this is how much terrorists have gotten support from Saudi and this is how much more they've gotten from Iran? No, they never even feel the need to make this argument.
Okay. Let's Google another thing because apparently we can't Google things. Saudi Arabia funding of terrorist groups. So I think we saw that Iran spent $700 million a year on Hezbollah and spent like $350 million per year on Hamas and other militant Islamic groups. So Saudi Arabia has been a subject of scrutiny regarding the funding of terrorist groups, particularly in the context of organizations like Al-Qaeda. While the Saudi government has made significant strides in combating terrorist financing, concerns remain, especially regarding private individuals and non-state actors within the kingdom. So that's a thing, though. So that would be the difference. Sorry, I need to go full screen and explain something to you guys. Hi, friends. Sorry, my hair looks crazy. So I'm gonna explain something to you because I swear to God, all these alt media freaks never bother to explain anything, and they pretend that all of this is unknowable. Let's talk about Osama bin Laden for a second. Osama bin Laden is like one of 54 children from the bin Laden family. The bin Laden family is the equivalent of the Trump name brand in that bin Laden is not associated with terrorism within the Middle East and North Africa. It's associated with construction and real estate. As a matter of fact, there are very rich, normal bin Laden people who are educated in the UK, who are educated in the United States, who have nothing to do with terrorism, and they're just normie construction millionaires and billionaires. Okay, that's the bin Laden family. But Osama was one of 54 children, who is an only child, who was raised by a relatively poor mother who did not receive much financial or spiritual or material support from the bin Laden family. So he had connections to rich people, but he himself was not independently wealthy. And so what he did in the 1980s is he traveled to Afghanistan effectively in order to be a liaison between the Saudi kingdom and the Mujahideen within Afghanistan, and he was a financier. So he would travel back to Saudi Arabia and say, hey, Uncle Ahmed, I'm fighting the holy war over in Afghanistan, and I got all my friends who need AKs and RPGs and shit. Can you throw us a few $1 million? And because these dudes are billionaires, they're like, yeah, sure. Here's a few $1 million, Osama. Go have fun. And that was Osama in the 1980s. Well, what ended up happening was, in the 1990s, he decided that Saudi Arabia itself is evil because Saudi Arabia plays footsies with Israel and the United States, despite Israel slaughtering tens of thousands of Muslims and despite the United States being an evil, degenerate empire that is trying to control the world. So as a result, F the Saudi government. And so the Saudi government said, F you right back. And Osama bin Laden was no longer friends. But just because the Saudi government and Osama bin Laden were no longer friends doesn't mean that there weren't Saudi nationals who were sympathetic to bin Laden's perspective. And so he was able to secure financing and logistical support from private citizens. I would say that argumentatively, having private citizens be sympathetic to freedom fighters and willing to support them financially or logistically is different than the state itself being willing to pay billions of dollars in order to support those organizations. I don't think that the Saudi government wrote a check to Al-Qaeda. I think that Uncle Hafiz, who is the state secretary of the interior, who's an oil millionaire or billionaire, wrote a check to Osama bin Laden for a few $100,000 or a few $1,000,000. And Hafiz, because he's like, you know, friends with the king's nephew's son, is not going to go to jail for funding Al-Qaeda, but it's not the official position of the Saudi government to fund Al-Qaeda. Do you know what I'm saying? Does everybody understand that? Do I have to break that down further? Because honestly, like, I swear to God, there are so many creators. There are so many alternative media pundits who have like an 80 IQ. It's actually crazy. Or they pretend to have an 80 IQ so they can appeal to people who don't think. Excuse me. I'm going to check in with chat before we go back in, because let's face it, once again, you guys are more funny and more entertaining than the people who are put in front of us in order to entertain us. Bud123 says the Iran deal allowed inspections in Iran to enrich for nuclear power. Israel wants Iran to have no enrichment capacity. So if that is the negotiation aim, it is not achievable. I do remember that that was part of the deal, was that we were just going to provide civilian level enriched uranium and Iran would have no enrichment capacity. And I thought that they signed on to that, but that might have been something that they ended up abandoning. I forget. Fung Dark says, I've never heard of a realistic critique of the Iran deal that wasn't just an attack. I think I read that one, so I'll scroll ahead. Randy Chang says, Jonah Boy, there was an odd proposal in the 1930s to settle Jewish refugees in Japan instead of the Middle East. Listen, I would love to take all of Israel and settle it in Idaho or Montana, but number one, they don't want it. Number two, it's not practical. They just don't want the territory. They want it to be Israel because that's their historic homeland. You're not going to be able to convince them otherwise. They're not going to settle for Miami. They're not going to settle for New York. They're not going to settle for Idaho. So let's just deal with the world as it is. Trust me, I wish that Israel was in the middle of Alaska. That way we wouldn't have to deal with all these problems. But, you know, let's deal with reality instead of what we wish would happen. Shadow to Bravo. I think this is the one that I read earlier. Funding Hezbollah, Hamas, and the other groups in Syria seems like a fact that Iran is funding terrorist groups. Yeah. And then when we looked at the Saudi thing, it effectively says that the Saudi government isn't directly funding, but there's obviously controversy with private citizens funding terrorist orgs. Fung Dark says you actually don't need any enrichment to run certain nuclear reactor types, of which Iran was planning to build, so they never needed enrichment. Yep. So I think I mentioned earlier that they're doing that to cover for a weapons program. Rainbow Wright says, doesn't Iran have a whole wing of the military? Yep, I read that one. IRGC, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. Conservative Liberalism says, we invaded Iraq and people say it two ways. Let's not worry about how to say Iran. Well, listen, bro, I'm trying to be polite. Trying to be polite to our Iranian brothers. You know, we should at least be able to say their names correct if we're going to bomb the crap out of them. Christian Blair says, Iran isn't capable of effectively countering U.S. or Israeli jets or bombers. Yeah, but can we strike deep enough in order to blow up the mountain complexes? That's the question. Conservative Liberalism says, we fed Osama bin Laden to the fish. I think I remember that. Caught up to the Iran comment. All right. Dr. Plague Doctor says, wouldn't the solution to getting a nuclear energy going to be just having a third-party nation provide and monitor fuel use? Dr. Plague Doctor, I think that was the Iran deal. But as we mentioned before, I think Trump blew it up because it was done by Obama, and he didn't want to have a nuanced diplomatic solution to the problem. R. Hickernil says, really seems like Trump ripping up that Iran deal with no plan was a bad idea. Yep. And I think that's where I was, because we were talking about Chirac. Whatever says, do you think Russia and China will abandon Iran? I don't even think they'll abandon them. I think they'll do what they can. But bear in mind, China doesn't like to go kinetic. They don't like to have Chinese troops deployed. They'll provide drones and missile technology and all that kind of stuff. But if Iran says, hey, we need more, China's going to shrug their shoulders and say, like, well, you can buy more, but this is how much we can produce. I don't think China is really going to be interested in the way that the United States is involved in Ukraine, where we've actually just said we support Ukraine and we're going to ramp up military production to support their conflict. I don't think China would have that level of support. And with Russia, one of the most interesting aspects of this is how much of the Russian military machine is tied up in Ukraine has actually weakened Iran. Randy Chang says, I feel like they already have, maybe. Shadow 2 Bravo says, I was just an infantry sniper who's in Idaho, based. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Sacred Snow. Good to see you. I got you to say crayon. True. Yes, Russia is... Christian Blair says, yes, Russia is busy in Ukraine and China won't fight the U.S. over Iran. Yep. I think I like Iran, right? Because it's similar to Iran, like somebody said in chat, but it acknowledges the I. Randy Chang says China will send weapons, money, but they won't roll out on Iran's behalf. Exactly. Dude Man Sue says, I probably explained it wrong. It's more like Iran, but more Middle Eastern sounding. Listen, we're not even going to try. We're not even going to try. We're just going to pronounce it 5 different ways over the course of the next 2 hours. China doesn't get anything from Iran. Our symbiotic trade relationship with China prevents them from declaring a hot war. Yes. Conservative liberalism says Osama bin Laden enjoyed anime. He got what was coming to him. Based. Christian Valaris. Also, the only military operation that China has engaged in with was fighting Boko Haram style insurgents to protect Chinese oil company workers, and their troops got effing smoked. Interesting. Oh no, I thought I was catching up with chat, but chat popped off. Crap. Dude Man Sue says Connor hearing the Google pronunciation would help. They suggest Uran. Well, yeah, but I think, dude, no. I'm just going to mispronounce it 7 different ways. I'm going to get back to chat. Or I'm going to get back to the content because chat actually like popped off while I felt like I was catching up with you guys. And so I'm not even going to bother. I'll catch up with you guys as I'm capable. But I'm not going to freak out if I'm not totally able to catch up. All right. Let's select this comment so I don't get lost. Let's exit this part of the Google search and let's watch Dave Smith be confused about things he could easily research on the internet.
Compare how much money the U.S. has given to terrorist organizations, or Israel has given to terrorist organizations, or Israel has facilitated other countries give it.
Yeah, okay. And what he's talking about here is during this Syrian conflict, we gave money to the Free Syrian Army, who was fighting alongside jihadist organizations in order to take out Bashar al-Assad. And he's making that equivalent because the Free Syrian Army was working with the Islamists. And the Islamists were some of the most competent militia members on the battlefield. And so they gave some of the weapons and gave some of the financing to Al-Qaeda affiliated militant groups. And so he's saying that funding militia groups in a hot civil war against a regime that's hostile to us is equivalent to spending $1 billion a year on terrorist organizations. Thank you for your insight, Dave Smith. As always, brilliant analysis.
There's no objective standard here. But if essentially the standard is because Iran has given Hamas some weapons in the past, therefore they're a proxy, and therefore when they attack Israel...
No, Dave Smith, we Googled this. I don't know if you saw the stream, but we Googled this. It was $750 million, or it was $700 million to $1 billion a year to Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization that does fight that does fight Israel. And then it was around $350 million to random militia orgs, of which Hamas is a part, including Republican Guard Corps training, weapons, and cash. So, I mean, you should watch the stream, Dave Smith. You might learn something.
On October 7th, Iran has attacked Israel. Well, then what is Israel attacking Iran? Other than the U.S. attacking Iran, right? If that's not, I mean, and come on, and look, this is
proxy state.
Yeah, and same with Ukraine and Russia. It's the same line of argumentation.
Right. So if you're, but this one,
holy shit, I hate these people.
One is so much more devastating because it's not just that we give Israel the weapons and the money and the intelligence, but at the very least here, I mean, we had people, we had evacuation orders for 24 to 48 hours before the attack came. Donald Trump is speaking out of both sides of his mouth. Netanyahu here is clearly saying that Donald Trump knew this attack was coming. So imagine they had that on Iran with October 7th. They don't have anything close to that. So make no mistake about it. We are at war with Iran right now. The United States of America is. Donald Trump has betrayed MAGA, betrayed America first.
Lol.
He has made the most disastrous decision to lead America into another war. Now, if they want to say that, look, there is an argument here, I suppose, that perhaps Iran is a better candidate for a regime change than Iraq or Libya was. This is the argument they're going to make. It seems a much more compelling argument that we're staring at yet another disaster. And as you were pointing out, Crystal, you know, I heard a little bit of your segment as I was waiting here. Yeah. As you were pointing out, which I think is really the most important point, is that this is the celebrating. It's just like unbelievable. It's 24 hours into it. They're all celebrating how easy this was. Look, I remember I was a little kid at the time, but I do vividly remember the celebrations after the Gulf War in 1991. And they were like, look how easy that was. And we didn't take any losses. We went on to be bogged down in that country for 30 years following that war. We all remember the mission accomplishment. We all remember Hillary Clinton saying, we came, we saw, he's dead. A few years later, when she was running for president, she wouldn't dare bring up Libya because it was so obviously a colossal failure. So the people celebrating this right now are just, they've lost their minds.
I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this analysis. It's fairly close to what I said, which is that regime change is always infinitely more complex and bloody and scary than anybody gives it credit for. And we shouldn't be flippant about it. I'm okay with that. I think Dave Smith is an ignoramus who's intentionally ignorant. I think that there's things that he could easily research that he's just factually incorrect on. But if the thrust of his argumentation is that we should not be cheering on regime change in Iran, whatever you want to pronounce it, I think I'm going to go with Iran. We should not be cheering that on because even if the Ayatollahs fall, even if there's pro-democracy revolution in Iran that's like helped out by a few CIA agents and a few briefcases filled with cash and a few American provided weapons, then what we're talking about is the destabilization of 1/3 of the world's oil supply. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dead people in probably like sectarian conflict. So yeah, we shouldn't be flippant about that. I agree with that thrust.
People get swept up in war fever.
The flashbacks, the WMD talk, the like celebratory mission accomplished vibe, in that clip with Bibi, and I've heard so many others say this, they're yearning for freedom. I mean, it's just like, it makes me feel like has everybody just erased their memories of what happened here? Yeah. It's utterly insane to me. And to your point about our involvement.
Sorry, freedom is good. If there was a long-term pro-democratic revolution in Iran, that would be good, but we need to know how bloody and costly it's going to be, and we shouldn't be directly involved unless there's actually an organic groundswell of support for a revolution against the Ayatollahs.
Involvement. Let's put this next piece up on the screen. We now know that at least the recent discussions about, diplomatic negotiations and, hey, we're going forward with these talks this weekend was a ruse to provide cover and the element of surprise for the Israelis. So now you have this report. A U.S. official confirmed to me over the weekend Israel had an operational window to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, but President Trump made it clear he is against such a move. This was first reported by Steve Holland. There is no reason for anyone, us, the Iranians, anyone, to believe these reports. I mean, it does also remind me of, during the Biden, they're very upset with Netanyahu leaking to always Barack Ravi. They're very upset with him, et cetera, et cetera. Why would anyone ever believe a word that comes from Trump or Steve Witkoff or anyone else associated with this administration after they've gloated about the fact that they were using diplomatic negotiations as a tool to effectuate, to help kick off this war? I mean, I've seen this. I'm curious your thoughts about this, Dave. I've seen this analysis that Trump was persuaded, this might be true, was persuaded by Bibi that he would have a better hand going into negotiations with Iran if he let Israel start this war and participated, as we've indicated, in starting this war. That is the most idiotic, insane possible analysis I can imagine. I guess it's possible that he really is that absolutely idiotic, but
he is. He is, Crystal. He is, Dave. Full screen again. Listen, guys, I think you know me. I'm a neocon shill. I'm all about spreading democracy. I'm all about the republicanism is a natural human good. I'm all about that shit. However, Trump is an idiot. So even if I think that there is a moral calculation that we can make about how dangerous Iran having a nuclear bomb, we can make a moral calculation on how bad that is, and then decide whether or not we're going to do a preemptive strike against them gaining a nuclear weapon. That is a moral calculus that the United States and Israel can make. And ultimately, the calculation can lean to the point that a preemptive strike to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons is a justified action. That is something that I believe, okay? I also believe that while I don't want American boots on the ground, I don't want our treasure wrapped in it, I don't want to be involved in another Middle Eastern and North African conflict, I also believe that a revolution against the theocratic authoritarian jerks in charge of Iran right now could be potentially good in the long term. I believe those things wholeheartedly. But why I am laughing on Twitter, I'm posting the Tom Cruise laughing meme. I'm going to show you guys the Tom Cruise laughing meme is because all of these people thought that they were getting a dove and they thought they were getting like a 5D chess player. And now that Trump being an idiot about something that they care about, they suddenly understand that he's an idiot. And it's like, where were you for the past 10 years? How did you not understand this in 2015? I am just posting this underneath MAGA accounts who are freaking out over and over again. Look at this. Look at Tom Cruise. Look at him in love with Katie Holmes, laughing his ass off to the point that his chin is shoved into the back of his spine. Look at the red eyes, bro. I'm just posting this over and over and over again under MAGA accounts because I can't believe they finally understand how stupid he is. What's the other one that I like to post? Fell for it again award meme. I'm just spamming this every day to all of these MAGA accounts because they're acting so shocked that this is happening. And it was this was obvious in 2015. This was obvious in 16. This was obvious in 18. This was obvious in 20. This was obvious in 22. This was obvious in 24. I can't believe that they have fallen for it again. I'm happy they got what they voted for. A bunch of idiots. It's Bashir al-Assad. Okay, now I know you're just screwing with me. Now I know you guys are messing with me. All right. Kyle says Iran. I'll go with Iran. Sounds good to me. Randy Chang says, quick, someone photoshopped some Sailor Moon merch into Osama's bunker photos. True. Sacred Snow says, it's going to... No, stop. Anime is great. You just have to ignore the degenerate stuff. Sure. I mean, that's true of all art, but let's face it. There's a disproportionate amount of degeneracy in anime. Breaking Points is the dumbest of all shows. Man, this is like taking a bath. Like a bath in lukewarm water that slowly boils so your brain becomes smoother over time. Sacred Snow says, F this entire panel. They are a scourge on politics. It's actually amazing to me that they're this dumb. They're this dumb and they're this popular. AF says, Sagar makes me want to put screws in my ear canals. Man is a walking bad take factory. Yeah, it's impressive almost. He hasn't said anything yet, but I agree with you. His Twitter isn't crazy. Fung Dark says it's 1,000% better than Sanction and Prey. Yeah. Fashion 40 said Dave Smith talks like he knows everything and is yet the most ignorant person in the room. Did he forget that Google exists? That's actually frustrating to me. Sacred Snow says bunch of normie ass no research pundits. Bro, these are some of the richest pundits on the planet. They're some of the most successful alternative media pundits on the planet, and they forgot how to use the internet. It's actually impressive how stupid they are. Rainbow says, why do these people have such a hard time understanding that just because we might have influence over a country doesn't make it a proxy state? Literal brain rot. I swear to God, they just bought into the contrarian America bad bullshit, and they just never stopped. They just never stopped. Biz D says, one might say they fell for it again. Kingslayer Damocles says, but the deal was threat of sanctions and prey. Okay. Well, dude, like we could argue that. But Kingslayer Damocles, I don't want to get bogged down into it. because I don't think that you and I in chat are going to sit down and renegotiate the perfect Iran nuclear deal. That's not where we're at right now. Where we're at right now is the MAGA people thought that they were electing a 5D chess playing 5,000 IQ dove, and then they got a 30 IQ dove that sometimes forgets that he's a dove and then turns into a hawk and then turns into a dove and then turns into a hawk and then turns into a dove and then turns into a hawk, which was all predictable. It's all predictable. They fell for it again.
But, you know, what do you make of that? Is that really what happened here? And what do you make of this report that supposedly, oh, he was the cooler head and said you can't take out the supreme leader?
Yeah, well, I'd say Trump might be that idiotic. And, you know,
Based. Did we see her eyebrows shoot up? Oh, she knows that she's going to piss off her own audience. Watch this.
Like, oh, he was the cooler head and said you can't take out the supreme leader.
Yeah, well, I'd say Trump might be that idiotic. And
one more time. Watch Cristobal's face, because she has been so used to, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, Breaking Points, Sagar and Jetty and Cristobal used to be on a different show. I forget what it's called, but it was like The Hill. And they were contrarian pundits over at The Hill, but they became so contrarian that even The Hill was like, okay, you guys are idiots. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to go do our own show. And their show is wildly successful, but correct me if I'm wrong, a substantive amount of their commentary was like, you know, oh, the deep state's so bad that maybe Trump will shake things up and he'll do this, that, and the other thing. And so they never actually praised Trump, but they always did this contrarian line of argumentation to Trump was preferable to the uniparty, right? And so now they're being hoisted by their own predictable petard, where obviously Trump is way worse than the uniparty. And so talking shit about Trump, they can do that in reference to policy, but they can't attack Trump himself because, like, obviously their base is made up by a bunch of like Trump contrarian freaks. So watch this. Watch this. I'm going to put my mouse on her eyebrow. Watch what her eyebrow does when Dave Smith said maybe Trump is actually an idiot.
Yeah, well, I'd say Trump might be that idiotic. And
dude, that's like a full half-inch raise. All right, sorry, one more time. I'm having fun. This one, she obviously has like a little bit of work done. You know, she's still a good-looking gal, whatever. But she is so shocked that Dave Smith would call Trump an idiot that her eyebrows were actually successfully able to beat the Botox. Watch this.
yeah, well, I'd say Trump might be that idiotic. And, you know,
on the right eyebrow, it was more than the left eyebrow. Nice.
he has, again, we're kind of speculating here, but he has bragged in the past several times about how he's so smart for keeping these hawks around, because then that puts all these pressure on people to come to the negotiating table.
That's why he said he had John Bolton.
Yeah.
Yeah, his example was John Bolton, who killed the deal with North Korea. Like, that was his example of it being like such a stunning success or something like that. It reminds me of like when people brag about the Abraham Accords and what a success they were, and you're like, oh yeah, they worked out so great. They led to this. Like, how, I don't even understand how you could, it'd be one thing if peace swept the Middle East after the Abraham Accords and you go, oh, okay, maybe they played a role, but it's been a nightmare all across, the worst fighting that we've had there in 20 years. And so, since our last disastrous invasions. But so, look, I mean, it seems to me like there's a couple possibilities here. None of them are good. One of the possibility is that, which I think is plausibly the case, that Israel betrayed Donald Trump, and then this is just his best way to deal with it. Like, essentially, Donald Trump was trying to negotiate, and then Israel just went ahead and launched the attack anyway. And then as a response to that, Donald Trump would rather look strong and go, no, I was in on it. It was our plan all along. Or the other possibility, which I think is more likely, is that he was never negotiating in good faith and it was a distraction and Donald Trump was in on it. Either way, we're at the same place.
Yeah.
Either way, even if Donald Trump was betrayed by the Israelis and then just took their side in public, which has happened with different presidencies over the years. It certainly happened with Bill Clinton after Camp David. So maybe that's the case. But then either way, then you're just so weak and pathetic that even after the Israelis betray you, you'll still come out and catch their back and support them in this war. Well, that's just as bad from the Iranian perspective and from any reasonable person's perspective.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't know. We'll probably find out more about this over time. But either way, in effect, it's the same thing. You know, and then we're left in the position where you're supposed to sit here and justify a sneak aggressive preemptive attack. Like somehow you're supposed to feel like you're the good guys in an absolute war of choice against a country that does not have nuclear weapons. Let's get real here. The only country in the Middle East who secretly has nuclear weapons is Israel.
Yes.
Oh my God, the contrarian brain rot. So Israel doesn't have secret weapons. I think they have open weapons. Didn't we research this earlier where JFK was fighting with the Israelis about getting a bomb like 60 years ago? When did Israel get nuclear weapons? Israel has secretly developed the ability to build nuclear weapons around 1967, according to the Arms Control Association. The United States was reportedly convinced by 1973 that Israel had nuclear weapons. However, so far, Israel has not used its nuclear weapons in any war. Okay, so we've known since the 60s? Dave Smith is an idiot or a propagandist or both. I can't tell. And then on top of that, how do you contend with the fact, Dave Smith? I have a question for you, Dave Smith. I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand. Okay, it's my turn. Dave Smith, what do you say to the fact that the IAEA, the people who are responsible for regulating nukes across the world, civilian and military, I believe. I don't know if they regulate military, but I know for a fact they regulate civilian. What do you say to the fact that the IAEA has stated that they've gotten radioactive impulses from Iran, that indicates that civilian enriched uranium can be as low as 5%, and Iran currently has emissions that indicate that they have 60% enriched uranium? How do you contend with that fact? I expect an email or a comment or a reply on Twitter shortly.
Iran is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel is not, and they have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and
it's
they're
just
a
unbelievable.
rogue nation attacking six of their neighbors as we speak, and are not part of the Non-Proliferation.
Right. Yeah, we actually.
I'm just gonna let that roll like water off of a duck's ass. I can't contend with every silly thing they say. It's bubbling in my brain, but if I contend with everything, we're going to be here forever. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read chat because you guys are smarter than these fucking brainlets. Conservative liberalism says, well, actually, Cameron Mosley says, Connor, I'm going to say it again. People need to be taught about freedom. You can't force freedom. I agree. They need to want it themselves. Conservative liberalism says, we should all meet up in the Discord after stream and argue about how to say Iran. Randy Chang says, why would anyone ever believe anything that goes against what they already think? Crystal ball. Based, Randy Chang. Good analysis. Sultan Al-Fahim is laughing. Good. Dude Mansu says, God bless you, Connor. You revived the republicanism I was raised with, but my parents lost to Trumpism. I'm sorry, King. Justin says, Iran having a nuke is an issue, but Israel having nukes is a problem too. The Samson option. Okay. What are you going to do about it? You want to invade Israel so they can't nuke us? Seems counterproductive. Whatever 4690 says, Connor, the problem is the Democrats are woke open borders lunatics. I don't know. There's some centrist Dems who are talking about closing up the border. AF says, fool me 70,000 times. Well, can't get fooled again. Haha. He says 69,420 times, but still. Groovy McCrout says, Trump stumbling unintentionally into success in politics have convinced people that it's actually intentional idiocy that works when it clearly isn't. Are you wrong, though? Fung Dark says, we have gone to war already without the deal. True. Justin says they have nukes and said they would nuke all capitals across Europe. Yeah, if the world was ending, Justin, and if everybody was attacking them and if nobody was coming to their defense. And by the way, that's like coming up with, what do they call it? Like Operation Northwoods, our plan to invade Canada. Like Operation Samson is one of those like hypothetical military plans that people war game. I don't think it's the stated open policy position of Israel that if the state of Israel is being destroyed and nobody is helping them and everyone is attacking them, that they'll just nuke the planet. Okay. They might have that plan. They might have it war gamed or whatever, but that's like us having it war gamed and planned to invade Canada. Unless you get someone stupid and crazy like Donald Trump, then those plans will never be used. It's like a hypothetical. Dude, I have a hypothetical to find some people in my chat and, not dox them, actually find them and go kick them in the nads. Just because people are annoying in my chat doesn't mean I'm actually going to go out into the world, find them, and spend all the money on gas to go to their house and kick them in the nads. It's just a fantasy. It's just a game plan in the back of my head. Melody says, Connor, at what percentage of enriched uranium will Iran need for you to have the okay boots on the ground if it came to it? I don't think I would ever be okay with boots on the ground, Melody. I think I would say just do airstrikes at their nuclear infrastructure and call it a day. Possum says, enjoy your existence before grassroots genocides all the gray names in this chat for green name supremacy. True. Be careful. We're not going to be demonetized forever. And if we're not demonetized forever, then grassroots is going to come in and slaughter all the white names. Sager's No says, they got a 7 IQ R-slur pigeon pooping all over them. True. One more and then we'll get back to it. AF Racing says, the best criticism of Dave I've seen is that he portrays himself as an informed political pundit, but when cornered, he retreats to, I'm just a comedian. Yep.
Let's be cool with that.
We have a non-compliant nuclear member of the NPT actually attacking a member of the NPT who is far more in compliance with said international treaty. Hey, whatever. What do I know, right? You know, what's even crazier to me,
not much, Sagar.
Dave, is just like the lead up to the war in Iraq, we already have our Ahmed Talibi. I actually can't believe it, or our 1953 Operation Ajax. Let's go and put B4, please, up on the screen. We actually have members of the Israeli government who are tweeting out pictures of the son of the Shah of Iran, basically insinuating that they are going to re-implement the monarchy on the people of Iran. It's like 1953 all over again.
The Shah was infinitely better for Iran than the Ayatollahs. Problem?
Or just like this, fascination with these Western figures who've lived here, for their entire lives almost at this point. We're like, oh, actually, these guys, because we're buddies and they agree with us, the people of Iran will totally take to that. And we're going to implement.
So hold on. We got 3 people who say, Crystal always attacks Trump, says John. General So says, do you think Crystal likes Trump? Kingslayer says, Crystal has always attacked Trump. Okay, listen. I'll stand corrected. I don't have to defend a weak position if I don't watch this show enough. And Crystal is a frequent critic of Trump. However, what I want you guys to pay attention to, and I'm not saying this is necessarily Crystal. Okay, I want you to pay attention to this. There is a way to criticize somebody in a very tepid way, but then ultimately align with them. In the rhetoric surrounding that level of it, it's intentional. It can be intentional. It can be subconscious. But you go, I don't like this. I don't like this, and I don't like this. I also don't like this, and I think that this is silly. But compare it to this, this, and this, and therefore blah, 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 blah. And so you can take that rhetorical tact and you can do it one of 2 ways. Let's say that Crystal is comparing Trump to the uniparty, globalist, whatever people, right? Then at that point, if she says that the uniparty is actually worse than Trump and the military industrial complex is worse than Trump, et cetera, then the logical inference is that Trump is the lesser of 2 evils and you should side with Trump. There's also something that a lot of these pundits do, which is they'll spend a minimal amount of time or a very tepid amount of criticism on a certain character like Trump, and then they'll have blistering critiques of another party, and then they'll just kind of leave it up in the air for you to decide who you hate more. Okay. Some of this is subconscious. Some of this is intentional. And I kind of leave it up to you guys, leave it up to you guys to decide which. So just because Crystal has been critical of Trump in the past, maybe I have Sitch and Adam PTSD. Maybe I have Sitch and Adam PTSD to the point where I'm just assuming that Breaking Points is similar to Sitch and Adam. But in my opinion, if you get any other impression from Sitch and Adam besides the fact that they lean more right than they lean left, I think you're high. Like, I think you're just not paying attention. Because what happens is frequently, very frequently, like probably 70% of the time, 80% of the time, they punch left. And then when they punch right, it's like 20% of the time, 30% of the time. And generally speaking, the only time that I've seen them go hard is when it's like freak right, woke right. That's the only time I've seen them go hard. And so I think inferentially, Sitch and Adam should lead you to like a center right position. At least the content that I was engaging with like a year ago would absolutely lead you to that conclusion, especially if you were listening to Adam. Anyways, I'm gonna read a couple of chats because you guys are cooler. Nil says uniparty has become a thought terminating cliche and you can safely ignore anyone who says it seriously. True. Kyle says laugh my ass off. This is happening says she even gives a little nod. Yep. Christian Blair says Crystal is a progressive, so she hates Trump. She is still arsled like her husband. Okay. Kyle is the ultimate tool. What I'm going to ask, because you guys are effectively criticizing me and saying that I'm wrong, which is fine. You can say that I'm wrong and I'm being silly and I'm being too hyperbolic. My question to you, though, is Crystal more... So she's critical of Trump. You're saying it's critical of Trump and it's unfair to characterize her as doing the contrarian, yeah, but she's not as bad, or he's not as bad as the uniparty. My question to you is, does she do what I said rhetorically, where she will criticize Trump, but then she'll have a blistering critique of the uniparty and the deep state? Sacred Snow says, I'm almost effing positive Dave was one of the effing dunces sowing into no new wars and peace in the Middle East during the campaign. I'm going to sewer slide. Well, don't do that. We still love you. Fashion 40 says, Dave shouldn't even be a pundit. He really sucks that people will continue to watch him while he's always wrong. Was he not in Tim Pool saying the Abraham Accords were good? Am I mistaken? Well, you're going to have to bring up your criticisms of the Abraham Accords, because as far as I know, the Abraham Accords were responsible for normalizing relations between Israel and all of the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. Dr. Plague Doctor, last one before we get back into it, says, yeah, bring it back, Dave. It's Israel's fault. No way the geriatric scam artist or is the idiot in the room. Laugh my ass off. Yep, pretty much.
This new regime. They're not even being subtle about it. Like I said, these are literally members of the Israeli government who are teasing basically the restoration of the monarchy in Iran by force. It's like 2003 all over again, where we have this buddy here, like you said, with the neocons in Washington, and then this theory that we can just go in, blow out the regime, and then we're going to implement this new style of government. I mean, this is as naked as it gets, in my opinion, on all of this. And I want you to just, go through.
I'm going to say something that's going to blow the contrarians' minds. It's okay to hate your enemies and to wish for your side to win in geopolitical struggle. It is okay to think that liberalism is better than fascism. It's okay to think that liberalism is better than authoritarian communism. It's okay to think that liberalism is better than Islamism and specifically jihadism. It's okay to believe that, and it's okay to cheer for mixed economy capitalism and liberal democracy and republicanism to win out over Islamo-fascistic governments and theocratic governments. It's okay to cheer that on. Didn't know if you guys knew that or not.
Perhaps because you're so well read on the history of these, these attempts by the United States and others to install these types of figures. And it never, ever works out. When have we ever backed the right horse in the Middle East?
He saved it. He saved it at the last second. I was going to say Europe is free because of the United States of America. I was going to say Japan is free because of the United States of America. I was going to say Korea is free because of the United States of America. I'm going to say Vietnam and the Southeast Asia is currently using us and is friendly to us because they're using us as a counterbalance against Chinese hegemony. There's plenty of examples outside of the Middle East and North Africa where actually we're doing okay. Egypt used us in order to, they use our aid and support for their military in order to throw off the Muslim Brotherhood and their governments, which I think is good. What's another one? Iraq. They used us in order to fight off ISIS. You can talk about like power abhorring a vacuum and all the regime change wars leading to hundreds of thousands of deaths. I'll agree with that. But Bashir al-Assad just got thrown out. The revolutionaries finally won in Syria, and now the Syrian president has like neoliberal policies, and even though there's like little mini genocides happening in Syria right now, the president is at least talking about like a multi-religious, multi-ethnic liberal polity. So yeah, dude, like fuck you. Sorry, real quick, this comment is important before we get back into it. Fung Dark seems like you can draw a line from the Abraham Accords under Trump to the Great March of Return on October 7th, but Fung Dark, correct me if I'm wrong, the Great March of Return was effectively the Gazans and the Palestinians realizing that they weren't going to get support from the outside Arab world, and as a result, they knew that they had to instigate a protest in order to get the world's attention back on them, or else they would never have the capacity to get any kind of border concessions from Israel. That's my understanding, is that the Great March of Return stemmed from desperation due to geopolitical isolation. Same thing with October 7th, which you can view as like bad, but isn't that better than having the Gulf states openly support Hamas? Just a question.
Yeah. And of course, look, installing the Shah to begin with in 1953 is a huge part of the reason why we have the current government in Iran that we have, which is a horrible, repressive government that does not give their people liberty. And we should all, oppose that. But the thing is that war is so much worse. It's like Saddam Hussein was a brutal, oppressive dictator also. But the worst thing that ever happened to the people of Iraq was George W. Bush invading the country. And
holy shit, Iraqis don't even believe this. Oh my God. Dave Smith, it's not 2002 anymore.
Much worse. It's like Saddam Hussein was a brutal, oppressive dictator also, but the worst thing that ever happened to the people of Iraq was George W. Bush invading the country. And
okay, bear in mind this is anecdotal, but I would actually love to see polling within Iraq. I was in a group call with two Iraqis, and the two Iraqis were saying that, like, obviously the war was like the worst thing that happened, right? Hundreds of thousands of dead, ethno-religious civil war, everybody's killing each other, everybody hates each other, et cetera, et cetera. But I asked them, compare Iraq now to Iraq before the war, which is better, which is worse? And they said, without hesitation, that modern Iraq is infinitely better compared to Iraq under Saddam Hussein. Of course, war is bad. Nobody is arguing that war is good. But pretending that, like, the Iraq war can only be evaluated through its worst moments of violence compared to the results that it actually had in the country, I think is insane cope. It's 16-year-old stoner brain rot. This dude is a pissed off 19-year-old who was smoking weed in the early thousands and was like, man, I'm going to ride my skateboard. I can't believe how authoritarian and fascist the government is. And then he would like listen to Green Day on an MP3 player, and then he just never grew up. Dave Smith is still riding a skateboard, listening to Green Day on an MP3 player in 2002.
And, the only examples that people look to, which are, rather remarkable examples of regime change, are Germany and Japan, and how they were brought back into the, liberal international order after.
Oh, thanks for the concession.
World War II. But what was required in order to get to that point was a clear war on the civilian population with, millions of casualties. And that, like, if your argument is we should bring that to Iran, then don't tell me one word about how you care about how the people of Iran are being oppressed, because that's a far worse, level of oppression. And so, this is a
war. That's an amazing statement. Dave Smith just thinks that, like, yeah, you should just let people be oppressed because being oppressed is not as bad as war. Brave take, libertarian Dave Smith. Brave take.
Again, as you guys have touched on, this is always how they talk at the beginning of these wars. It's always that democracy will sweep the region and that the people will greet us as liberators. It'll be easy, paid for in oil, all this stuff. But, you're going to sit here and tell me about how Washington, D.C. or Tel Aviv can, reorchestrate another society, can reconstruct it from the ground and choose its leaderships. I mean, just think about the hubris involved in that. As the late, great Harry Brown used to point point out when he was talking about the war on drugs in the United States of America. The U.S. federal government can't even keep drugs out of federal prisons. Washington, D.C. can't even solve the violent crime problem in Washington, D.C. But you're telling me we're going to install the new leader for the Iranians and the people will comply because what? Because the regime is so weak and the people want liberty so much? This regime has ruled since 1979 with the most powerful governments in the world opposing them, working on ousting them the entire time. And they've still stayed in power. So you could tell me a nice story. It's easy to write down a nice story. Oh yeah, I say we intervene and then we put the Shah's son back in and then everything works out fine. Okay, let's see that happen. And you know, the other thing that I'll add, and I don't know, I mean, maybe things have changed to
I'm okay with Dave Smith saying that it's infinitely easier to orchestrate societies from Washington, D.C. without realizing the blood and treasure that it will cost to have a tenth of the result, like a tenth of what your desired result is. I 100% agree with that sentiment, but he's so toothless that it's infuriating.
Some degree. I mean, certainly Israel was able to pull off that drone attack, which I don't think they would have been able to pull off in years past. But it was in 2007 that the Pentagon told George W. Bush that we cannot go to war with Iran because we do not have escalation dominance against them, essentially meaning that they can hit all of our bases and embassies in the region, and we are very vulnerable to them. And we've already seen demonstrated since the Israeli attack that the Iranian, the missiles that they sent last year toward Israel, as many of us guessed, that wasn't really their best. They were intentionally making an attack that wouldn't really hurt anybody, that wouldn't really lead to a war, which Iran has done over and over again. But now we've pushed them to the point where they probably don't feel that they have the option not to respond. And Donald Trump telling them to come back to the negotiating table now is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, what a impotent leader to be sitting there talking about coming back to the negotiating table. It's like sitting after Pearl Harbor and telling FDR, now's the time to go negotiate with the Japanese.
Right.
Negotiations are over now. The time for negotiations was before this. And so, yeah, Donald Trump looks, and man, I supported him this last year. I apologize.
Ooh. All right, I gotta let him finish that. I can't yap when he's about to do it.
So yeah, Donald Trump looks, and man, I supported him this last year. I apologize for doing so. It was a bad calculation. At the time, it seemed like the right one. But he should be impeached and removed for this one. Wow. And not on some like not on some ridiculous Nancy Pelosi. Of course, the Congress will never do it because they're all a bunch of, you know, corrupt hacks.
This is the one thing they support. This is like the
Donald Trump should be impeached and removed for this. All of his supporters should turn on him. It's the absolute betrayal of everything that he ran and campaigned on and everything that he stood for. And I will say, despite the fact that, you know, Donald Trump supporters have been labeled like a cult following, and that certainly is true for a percentage of his supporters, he is going to lose his coalition over this. I don't just speak for myself when I say there are a lot of us who simply will not go along with this. So it's just a devastating mistake. By the way, on top of that, he's also going to lose the deportation fight because of this, because right now he needed all the political capital he could have to turn that, you know, you got a majority support for deportations, but the minority is very mobilized and they're out and they're protesting all around the country. He needed all of his political capital for that move. So here's what we got. The neocons win. More war abroad and, you know, bomb the world and invite the world. No matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain.
It is fun.
Woo! Yeah! The neocons win. Bomb the world and invite the world simultaneously. Woo! Mixed economy capitalism mixed with the military industrial complex forever. Woo! Like I'm being partially sarcastic, man, but how am I not supposed to take that as like, it was so embarrassing to have Trump win the most recent election because it did take a coalition of libertarians, conservatarians, fiscal conservatives, social conservatives to all plug their nose and vote for one of the dumbest political operators I've seen successfully operate within the past decade. And it took like a broad coalition of people to just ignore reality in order to bring this into being. And now they're watching. They fell for it again. They're getting a fell for it again award. Awesome. You reap, you sow. You know, me reaping. Oh, this is awesome. Me sowing. Oh, what the fuck? You know, like good. I'm happy. I have Schadenfreude. I'm happy. I'm happy that you jumped onto a rake and it broke your nose, and I get to laugh at you for it. That's fantastic. I did a moral calculation last year, year and a half ago, when PV asked me to work with them, and they said, "Hey, man, we know that you hate Donald Trump. We need a Republican. Would you want to work with us in order to bring like alt media energy into canvassing operations to volunteer in order to fight Donald Trump?" And I was very conflicted because I was thinking to myself, it's like, yeah, I know that Kamala and the Biden admin is the lesser of two evils, but they also kind of suck. But I eventually made a calculation. I was like, you know what? No matter what the Democrats do, they will be ultimately the lesser of two evils. And I was correct. And I backed something that was a bitter pill, and I swallowed the bitter pill, and I put up with the criticism. And so, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I have a mild amount of Schadenfreude watching my political opposition get what they want and then jump onto a rake, and then the pole of the rake jump off of the ground and smash them right between the eyes. It's actually very, very emotionally satisfying. It's sad. It's sad that hundreds of thousands of people had to die for them to realize they made a mistake. But, that's the world, I guess. Justin says, I would agree with you, but Israel just started a war with Iran without alerting Trump. Israel's a pit bull with no leash, and you're okay with that? Justin, you just said they don't have a leash. What am I supposed to do about it? I already told you that there's like a line of argumentation where preventing Iran getting the bomb is morally justifiable. I don't have the details to know whether or not it is. I don't know whether or not Israel and the United States is being a bully, or if there's like a legitimate geopolitical security concern that requires these actions. I don't know. I don't have the intel. Excuse me. Kyle says, there's more of us gray names than there are green names. Where's the resistance in chat? Well, Grassroots isn't here in order to, support the grassroots resistance. And also we're demonetized currently. So sorry about that. Justin says, that doesn't bother you that they have that as an option, that a bigger security risk than Iran having a nuke. Iran is building a nuke to defend, not attack. You're making a lot of presumptions there, brother, considering they're spending $1 billion a year on jihadist terrorism. Sacred Snow says, sorry if I missed the explanation. I was a little late. I don't see your original question. Sacred Snow says, if you're one of the resident DGGers, but Destiny's Twitter post sums it up quite well. This was part of a much larger point of no new wars, but AA was a big cause of the Great March of Return, which was a cause on October 7th. Oh, I think I just answered that, which is effectively like, yeah, the Great March of Return and October 7th were both reactions to the Abraham Accords, but the Abraham Accords were Gulf states and Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel. And normalizing relations with Israel is more important than a terrorist attack that kills 1,200 people and what's going on right now. Because you could have Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states funding Hamas and Hezbollah and all that kind of stuff, and they're not, as far as we know. Bo Dickerson says, look up a picture of Iran in the 1950s and tell me it's horrible. I won't. The Shah tortured his political opponents. The Shah was a benevolent dictator. The Shah did not believe in democracy, but he fostered a better civil society than the Ayatollahs. General So says, I don't watch it either. I just remember them inviting Pisco on to go after Trump's unconstitutionality for half an hour. That's about as much as I know about them. Yep. Jack-o'-lantern says, pretty sure the Shah's son is pro-democracy. Sure. Groovy McCrout says, also he looks, not only does he look like the Shah, he also looks like Phil Leotardo from The Sopranos, which I love. Groovy McCrout says, Tim Pool is a master of that. Like, he's like, how can I be paid by Russia? I said Putin's a dumb meanie. Now welcome to my 100th episode on the satanic Democrats warmongers wasting millions on Ukraine. Right. Fung Dark says, if they have the facilities and mountains, they need entrances. The entrances are all that's needed to be struck to render the facility inactive. Fung Dark, you're correct, but then if the facilities have food, water, power that's built in deep into the facility, they can continue to operate for months while they're entrenched, and then more people can dig them out. So, I mean, that's the question. You can say that just blocking the door is fine, but if they're already in a silo that is capable of launching and they have all the materials and all the food that they need, blocking the entrance is not sufficient. I don't agree with your assessment. General So says she probably dislikes establishment Dems as well, which is why people assume she defends Trump. It's common in the online lefty political pundit sphere. Well, I'm not necessarily saying that she defends Trump. I'm saying that there's something. Here's another thing, too. You can criticize somebody's policies and somebody's perspectives and still maintain a good relationship. So Krista Ball can say, I don't like Trump's position on immigration. I think it's heartless. She can say that, and most people who support Trump won't freak out. Or she could say, Trump is a heartless fucking monster ripping kids from their families because the kids are citizens and the parents are illegal, and they're deporting the illegal parents with no plans for where the kids go. And so we're putting hundreds, if not thousands of kids into the foster care system, which is fucked up. And he's also an evil monster because through incompetence, he's killed 300,000 people in the past 6 months by cutting mosquito prevention and AIDS prevention in Africa. And by the time he leaves office, he's going to kill 3 million people. What a evil, manipulative, lying sack of shit. And guess what? Criticizing the policy, Trump supporters are still going to watch you. Calling Trump an evil piece of shit who's responsible for killing 3 million people, they're going to stop watching you. So my question is, which one does Crystal and Sauger do? Because they know where their bread is buttered. I guarantee that. Avigdor says, who thinks Bannon and Carlson are like jilted lovers moaning about Trump dumping them for a younger guy? Yeah, of course. Of course. They were loyal to the cult, and the cult was not loyal to them. Jonah Boy says, I still like Kyle. He's funny as fuck, but he has definitely gone wild over the years, especially since Trump got re-election. Gotcha. Sacred Snow says, see my response to Fung Dark for AA criticisms from D that I agree with. Pretty straight line from AA to October 7th. Sure, but is it preferable to the alternative? Jonah Boy says, Islam a homo? True. Sacred Snow says, you can argue that it was a net good, but it unnecessarily inflamed Israeli-Palestine. Sure. Sin Patty says, I'm late. What did I miss? Psychic damage. All right, let's continue.
Funny, some of the smartest evangelicals I know say that the war in Iraq is actually what killed them. And they're like, we were winning. We were on top in 2004. We were, with Defensive Marriage Act and all of this. But it was Bush, actually, who killed our agenda and any ability, to do that. And then we lost, obviously, the 2008 election. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it. But people who, if you do care about some of the domestic stuff, let's say, that Donald Trump did run on, well, you got your answer as to the easiest way to destroy it. Go ahead.
Well, look through all of American history, right? This is why it's so crazy for conservatives to not be anti-war. When did they lose the culture, the big time? When did they have the hippie sexual revolution? It was during the Vietnam War. And when did we see the rise in wokeism and progressive control of all these institutions? You think it was a coincidence that it was the administration after George W. Bush? When you launch an immoral war of aggression, you lose the moral high ground, period.
Yes.
You can't lecture your society anymore. But you hear some of these right-wing war hawks are going to lecture us about being pro-life, about abortion being murder. Get out of here. And this is why the evangelicals lost their seat at the table for a generation, because they went all in on murdering 1 million people in Iraq for no reason. And so, it was just.
Holy shit, I hate Dave Smith. I'm gonna spare you my Iraq rant. I'll try to keep it in 10 seconds. We sold Iraq WMDs in the 1980s so they wouldn't lose to Iran. In the 1990s, we kicked them out of Kuwait and we sanctioned them. These were all justifiable. In the early 2000s, we were looking for an excuse to get into Iraq. Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney in particular were looking for an excuse to invade Iraq. 9/11 happened, and we used the weapons of mass destruction that we sold them in the 1980s as a pretext in order to invade Iraq. The actual estimates are around 200,000 people died in the Iraq war. If you want to round it up to 1 million, I don't really give a shit. But if you look at the Iraq Body Count Project, which is it's online, Google the Iraq Body Count Project, you can actually show who was killed by what faction. 80 to 90% of the casualties within the Iraq conflict were not coalition forces running around massacring Iraqi civilians, which is the way that all these libertarians, these lolbitarian dickheads, and these anti-imperialist leftists categorized the Iraq war. It was Shia versus Sunni militias slaughtering each other in the tunes of the tens of thousands. So I don't want to hear this bullshit about how the United States just walked into Iraq and just lined up a bunch of Iraqi civilians and shot them in the back of the head. It's bullshit. It's a lie. They keep repeating it because it plays well to white guilt in the United States of America, but it's effectively, it's either like ignorance to the point that it might as well be a lie, or it's a lie. So Dave Smith, eat a bowl of phalluses.
John Quincy Adams, who said, if we go around the world looking for monsters to destroy, we will become the dictatress of the world, but we will lose our own soul.
Well said. One of our best presidents. Absolutely.
Well, you know, Dave, you may feel that way, but Bill Ackman feels very different. I mean, this is an important point to put B7 up on the screen, which is that I think you're right. There was a part of his coalition, including yourself and others, who thought Trump would be more, you know, more of a peace candidate and more anti-war than Kamala Harris as the alternative. But there was another part of the coalition that looks like this, that is all, you know, thinks that we have not gone nearly far enough in terms of fighting.
Yeah, but this isn't even a regime change. This is a preemptive strike in order to destroy nuclear capacity, which I need to see additional evidence in order to know whether or not it's justified. Also, I don't know if the world would be more stable if Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel all had nuclear weapons, and if they were just in a Mexican standoff. That might be a more stable world with mutually assured destruction. I don't know.
A direct hot regime change war against Iran. And so you've got Bill.
Nope, that's not what he said. The parade was great. Our military is incredible. And now that Israel needs our help to destroy Iran's nuclear threats to the world, Israel's military and air force have sufficiently degraded Iran's defenses such that now is the lowest risk, high probability to take out Iran's nuclear capability, a grave threat to us all. We should not let this opportunity pass, but Israel does not have the equipment and armaments to complete the job. We do, and it does not require boots on the ground. They're not asking for a regime change war, Crystal. Do not lie to my face. The war Israel has been fighting has been on behalf of all of us. Let's help them finish the job. Bill Ackman is being cringe, but don't mischaracterize what he's saying.
Ackman here saying the parade was great. Our military is incredible. Now Israel needs our help to destroy Iran's nuclear threat to the world. They say that he says Israel's military and air force have sufficiently.
I'm sorry for pausing and reading it before her.
Degraded Iran's defenses such that this is now the lowest risk, highest probability moment to take out Iran's nuclear capability, grave threat to us all. We should not let this great opportunity, Dave, pass us by. But Israel does not have the equipment and armaments to complete the job. We do. And it does not require boots on the ground. The war Israel has been fighting has been on behalf of all of us.
Who snorted? Who snorted at him saying that doesn't require boots on the ground?
Help them finish the job.
Yep.
This is a powerful voice in the Republican coalition. It's a powerful voice within the administration. It's a powerful voice, you know, nationally in terms of achieving the policy ends and goals that they want.
You know, it's like we're never going to get the mass deportations, but could we at least deport all of these war hawks to an El Salvadorian prison? Like, could we just, they really just should not. I mean, I don't know. It's testing
That's
my
the Israel horseshoe between you and me, Dave.
Right.
Well, it's really it's testing my my belief in libertarianism, because when I hear this stuff,
Good. Libertarianism is for teenagers.
these people do not have a right to speak. You shouldn't have a right to open your mouth. The nerve, you know, it's like,
Okay, let's not get too crazy with it.
they could just say these things that are so objectively untrue. Like, look, if you want to say,
How is it untrue that the United States military has a better bunker busting capacity than Israel does, and Iran or Iran is in a precarious position where their air defenses are eroded? So if we want to eliminate their nuclear capacity before it exists, now is the time to do so. And if we let this moment pass, if they have 60% enriched uranium and we just took out their generals, and well, not we, Israel. If Israel just took out their generals and Israel just took out their nuclear scientists, and if Israel just took out a bunch of high-end leaders and all that kind of stuff, this is an opportunity that will likely not repeat itself, because what's going to happen is Iran is just going to say, yeah, fuck it, we're going to build the bomb. So what's descriptively inaccurate about that, Dave Smith? I expect you to send me a Twitter DM.
hey, look, I think this war in Iran isn't going to be a disaster like all the other ones were, and I think we're...
That's not what he's asking for. He's asking for limited airstrikes in order to destroy the bunkers in which these nuclear precursors exist.
Finally right, even though we've been wrong 9 times in a row. I think we're right about this one.
And we weren't wrong 9 times in a row. You just have a child's understanding of geopolitics.
like, fine, make your argument. But to say this is the lowest risk, like that this is the lowest, this is by far the highest risk of any of the terror wars, objectively.
No
That's
doubt
not
about
like
it.
an opinion. That's
No
just,
doubt about
it might end up working out, but the downside is the riskiest by far. That is, any military expert would back that up, who's not lying through their teeth would back that up. So anybody sit down and argue with me about potentially what Saddam Hussein could have done to us after we invaded, or potentially what Gaddafi could have done to us versus what the mullahs can do to us. I'm sorry, the risk is at the highest here. I hope that doesn't come true. I recognize we're already at war with this country. I know it won't look good for me, but I hope it does go well. I hope it's not the disaster that it looks like it's going to be. But don't sit here and tell me that this is the least risky one. This is by far the riskiest of all the terror wars. You know, maybe the a proxy war with Russia was riskier than this. But compared to Libya or Syria or Somalia or Afghanistan or Iraq, no comparison.
Hey, if you like that video,
All right, I hate Dave Smith. Let's do a wrap up, and then I'm going to engage with chat, and then we'll start our next segment. Let's go full screen. So, in summary, sorry, let me go back up to Kyle. In summary, Dave Smith has a teenager's understanding of conflict. He was smoking marijuana, riding his skateboard, and listening to Green Day in 2003, and he never grew up. That's his political analysis: is war is bad, America bad, libertarianism good, all of the people that we fight are rational actors, and we should never intervene in anything ever because war is bad. Whereas, if you look at the history of the 20th century, we got Europe rebuilt by America after defeating Nazi Germany. We got Japan defeated and rebuilt back after Imperial Japan. We have South Korea, where tens of millions of people are free because of American interventionism. We have Vietnam, which we lost, and we lost terribly. But Vietnam was able to intercede in Khmer, Cambodia, and stop a massive authoritarian communist slaughter that was killing, millions of Asians. I think 25% of the Cambodian population was wiped out by authoritarian communists. And as a result of the horrors of authoritarian communism and China beating on their back door in the Sino-Vietnamese War, Vietnam has come our way. They've decided that, you know what, we fought the Americans and it was rough, but they're actually better friends than the Chinese. And so now we have a military and economic relationship where we're a counterbalance against another authoritarian communist place. So don't tell me that these things are all like, oh, it's all bad, it's all evil, nothing ever productive came from it. You're full of shit. Even with the Middle East and North Africa, modern Iraqis like modern Iraq more than they like the regime of Saddam Hussein. Of course, the Iraq war was fucked up. Of course, the Bush administration messed up. That's totally true. Hundreds of thousands of people dead in a civil war is still messed up. But don't pretend to me that the United States walked in there and just started shooting civilians in the back of the head. It's not true. It's not borne out by statistics. It's not real. And modern Iraqis prefer modern Iraq to Saddam's Iraq. And they sure as hell probably prefer it to Uday and Qusay, who are like documented sociopaths. So don't tell me that freedom is bad. Don't tell me that republicanism is bad. You can say that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You can say that it's too much blood and treasure, and I probably agree with you, but don't be such a feckless coward about everything all the time. And then when it comes to ultimately voting for Trump and thinking that he was the dove candidate who was going to 5D chess his way out of the geopolitical intrigues of the world, you were coping. You were coping then, you're coping now. I'm happy that you jumped on a rake and smashed yourself in the face. It made me laugh. Matthew Morton says, wow, just going to start up with the pot-smoking skater hate, huh? Listen, if you're a pot-smoking skater, be a pot-smoking skater, but don't talk to me about geopolitics, okay? If your geopolitics are everybody should smoke pot, brah, and chill out, brah, and that's your geopolitical analysis, then don't talk to me.